Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Broder Daniel, Shoreline, their biggest hit song. Let's dive into this. We've had Broder Daniel on the channel a couple times in the past, both for full reactions and for live streams. Always a good time with them. I don't think I've heard a single song of theirs that I didn't enjoy. Let's dive into Shoreline and see what their biggest hit sounded like. It's interesting, the bass is a bit more muted emotionally, while the guitar is almost emphatic.
Ever since I was 8 or 9, I've been standing on the shoreline. For all my life I've been waiting for something lasting. You lose your hunger and you lose your way. You get confused and then you fade away. All this town kills you when you are young. All this town kills you when you are young. I'm not the boy that I used to be. This town has got the youth of
Did we skip a chorus, or has this entire song sort of been within one atmosphere so far? The guitar focusing on just these higher pitched, longer held out notes. Yeah, interesting track right there. There is a rather homogeneous sound to it. The guitar riff itself changes between the verse and what I think is the chorus, but the overall feeling of it doesn't. The drum part is fairly consistent throughout. The bass is pedal tone, always playing the root note of the chord. And I'd even say that the vocal melodies are fairly consistent throughout too, not identical, but similar enough. It really is only the lead guitar that changes with any sort of drastic elements between what they're playing in this song. And through that it creates a rather singular feeling. The bass, as I mentioned at the beginning, giving us the pedal tone to the chords, comes across a little emotionally muted. Part of that is simply because we're just looking at four root tones, and we can glean some information from that, but more than anything, it's just going to give us directional information. This is one of the key tones of each of the chords, and it's going to allow us to have a bit of chordal movement to the track. It gives us that direction, that momentum, but it doesn't really give us a lot of emotional information. Now, listening to the chords that eventually come in, there's a little bit of heaviness to this, a weight, a dark cloud over this track. I don't necessarily want to use strong words like melancholic. I don't think it leans in that direction. I would call this probably pop rock music, and the poppy side certainly softens any of extremities that would come from the emotional side. So instead of melancholy or depression, it's sort of just a bleakness, possibly a darkness that hovers over this track. But through that darkness cuts the lead guitar line, which has anthemic qualities to it. This is a song of resounding resistance. Granted, I still think that emotionally the track is rather muted. I don't think this is necessarily a song that I would be bouncing around to. It's a song that got, a subtle body movement out of me, but not anything drastic. It's not a super energetic song, but it is positive. This is a silver lining kind of track, a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a darkness that's around us. We just need to get through it. That's the vibe I get from the music, from the harmonies, from the melodies. And I think when you pull in the vocal line too, particularly in what I think was the chorus, this elevates the positivity. This lines up with the guitars. I do think in the verse, the vocals kind of lean into the darkness a little bit. It creates this unease, it creates this tension, but having the vocals align with the guitar in the chorus elevates the song. It's what makes it have that feel good finale despite still having a black cloud lingering over it. What I think is really interesting here too is that there's sort of a trade off. When the lead vocals take over more of that positive sound in the chorus, we don't necessarily need the guitar doing the same thing. And this is where the guitar shifts. I had mentioned that this is the only instrument that really has a large deviation in their riffage. And they go from something a little more anthemic to something powerfully positive, hopeful, maybe even might be the term for it, as they just start holding out these really high notes. It's less about melody and more about, once again, emotion from the chords. Now, granted, we are just getting one note at a time, so once again, much like the bass, it isn't really too strong by itself, but when you pair it with the bass tone, which is giving us our root note, and you pair it with the vocal melody at the time, you now have a triad. You have one note from each of these instruments, three notes in total. We can build harmonic information out of this. We can build a strong emotion. And I think this is why this section feels brighter and more optimistic than the verse. because we now have a larger stack, and these instruments allow us to push into more positive vibes. And it allows the bass to not change anything. So it still gives us the moodiness, but we're changing the notes above it. We're shifting the intervals against that bass tone, and it's allowing us to adjust and alter the emotional resonance of this section. It ends up working really well, but it does feel bleak to me. We never pull away from that somber foundation to this track. Even at the end, there is hope against the darkness, but that darkness is still present. While I call this an anthemic song, it doesn't necessarily feel like an anthem of "we can do this." It feels like an anthem of "if we make it through this, we can do it." And with that conditional statement there, the "if we get through it," it's not quite as powerful as a track that says "we're going to do this." And it feels like hope in bleak times, something to stand behind, but not something that is certain. And that gives it a very specific flavor. I don't think I've ever heard a bleak anthem before. Maybe if I have, I'm just, it's not something that registered for me. Maybe it's something I've heard in passing, or just I never gave too much thought towards. But I think this is the first time I've used those words in my life, and it's interesting. It feels like a song of hope while acknowledging that things are not too hopeful right now. Now, I do want to bring up one other main thing here. It's the one instrument we haven't talked about because it's not melodic or harmonic. We have the drums. This provides a lot of information for this song, and I think it's what makes it feel as positive as it does, because the drums aren't heavy. The drums are energetic, actually. There's a lot of eighth note hi-hat ideas. We have a 2 and 4 snare beat on most of this that feels very directional. But it's light. The snare isn't hit too hard. That might be a production thing. I did notice that I could barely make out the hi-hat, so I'm going to assume that this is probably not great audio. So I don't want to touch on the production too much because this isn't even an official video. This is on some random channel, and it's also from a decade ago of music from 2 decades ago. So there's a lot of elements in here, variables I can't account for, of maybe even the original audio file that this person used to upload this video was lossy, and maybe it was even low quality to begin with. So I don't want to make any large discussion points about the production in general, but the hi-hat is there. And maybe the snare being as soft as it sounds isn't an original choice, but it's what I'm hearing here. The snare isn't too present in the mix. The hi-hat isn't too present in the mix, but you can feel the consistency. You can feel the continuous eighth notes of them. You can feel the drive of the bass kick. You can feel the momentum of that 2 and 4 snare. It is a drum part that doesn't contribute emotionally in a positive or negative way, but does contribute to the element of momentum. And when you have this idea of bleakness and hope, the momentum is the part that drives you. It pushes you through the bleakness to the hope. It is the train in the tunnel heading for the opening. Because otherwise, we just have a song that's kind of stationary. As I mentioned, harmonically, atmospherically, this track doesn't really change much. In fact, when we came back to what to me sounded like another verse, I asked if we even got to a chorus, because we were coming up to the halfway point and we had really only been within one idea. This very well could be a song that feels like being stuck in darkness with hope on the outskirts, but knowing you'll never make it to that. Hope being teased during bleak times. It's the drums that present the momentum to this, the direction, it presents the movement. It's what tells me this song is about getting through things rather than being stuck in things. The drums create the feeling of hopefulness rather than hopelessness. And they're incredibly important despite, again, kind of in the mix being a bit more muted than I would expect drum work to be on something anthemic, which again, for me, anthems are big, they're bombastic, they're, we're going to do this. It's about strength and perseverance. The drums usually match that energy, and here they don't, but they do provide momentum. They provide the push to get through. It's what keeps the song going. And I really appreciate that little detail. I think this would have been a very different song if the drums were less present. Maybe when I say less present, I don't mean mix wise, I mean compositionally, having less notes to play. But I also think it would have been very different if the drums were larger, more arena style, going for that bombast of a true anthem, a true rock anthem. It was a very intelligent decision, I think, to make them muted but driven. So I don't know what else to add to this, though. I mean, we touched on all the instruments, we touched on their roles, we hit all three main parts of music: rhythm, melody, and harmony. Um, yeah, and even role transference, which is pretty cool too. Um, let's hit some lyrics. There's not a lot of hope in the lyrics at all. It makes me wonder if the guitar isn't supposed to be inspiring hope to the narrator of this story. Regardless, though, it's a song about a dead end town, one with not a lot of prospects for the people who live there. And the only way to really make something of yourself, to find something you're proud in, to find purpose, is honestly to leave this town for somewhere better, somewhere with more options. The bridge that occurred between the first two verses introduces an idea that the chorus will eventually expand on. It says, "This town kills you when you're young." Now, I doubt this is a literal killing in that someone physically dies, but I think it is a mental killing. Maybe it's an emotional stunting. Maybe it just even destroys people's dreams. When you live in this town like this, you kind of see your options are limited. And if you stick around, you're not really going to do anything you're proud of. You're not going to find purpose here. Maybe even some of these lessons are taught fairly early by being in this town. The chorus eventually says that we die young and we are the shadows in the alley of this town. Once again, I still think this is more of an emotional or spiritual death, of kind of losing purpose in your life. But the idea of being shadows is interesting because it almost feels as if the children of this town are overlooked. We get a little bit more personal, though, with the verses. The first one says, "Ever since I was 8 or 9, I've been standing on the shoreline for all my life, waiting for something lasting. But you lose your hunger and you lose your way." And that's part of this idea of, I think, losing that the brightness of the world, losing your hope and your dreams, to have your hunger removed from you until mediocrity is just fine. Maybe even less than mediocrity becomes fine. You lose your drive to be, to exist, to represent yourself, to chase your dreams. Whatever hunger you have dies out here. The second verse mentions that the town has got the youth, and all the eyes have turned hollow from the work of sorrow. And that's interesting to me. I don't know what town is being referred to here. It might even just be a hypothetical, generally small town with small prospects. But in particular, I think a lot of these lines remind me of mining towns here in the United States, which, I mean, you kind of have two jobs that maybe three, depending on how close you might be to like a packaging factory. But you got your mining jobs, your factory jobs, or minimum wage. So you either break your body or you can't make ends meet. And that's kind of all that these towns have to offer people. They're small towns, usually only a couple gas stations, and that's it. And they really do break people down. And as a child, you get to see all these adults, and they're all broken people. They just never got to chase their dreams. They're like I mentioned earlier, your only options really to discover who you are and to feel pride in what you're doing is to leave this area for something that is going to treat you better. But moving isn't always something that everyone is financially capable of. Some people are just stuck in towns like this, and it absolutely drains you. And maybe that's the idea of it says, you die young in this town. I think it's that sort of realization, maybe even as a teen, that this is my future. These people, I will eventually be in the same position and sort of losing hope. I don't know. I see these parallels in it, but I don't think Broder Daniel is an American band. They're European, right? I don't remember what country in particular, but I still think it's really interesting how I can see these parallels. It makes me wonder how common these types of towns are across the entire world. The outro, though, states, I've got nothing to wait for. Where is life in this town? It's the death of the dream. It's the death of the self. It's seeing just everyone barely scraping by and grinding their bones to dust just to get bills paid, and kind of being defeated by seeing this every day. This is the reality of life in towns like this. So I find it interesting that I hear any hope in this track at all because there is none in the lyrics. And like I said, I wonder if the guitar isn't supposed to be inspiring hope, not necessarily to get through this, but to know that there's more beyond this. If the scope of the lyrics is this, the guitar says, we have this outside. And if the scope of the lyrics are just the town, then the guitar would represent the hope of leaving the town. Or at least that's how I want to read it. Anyways, I'm kind of curious what the band wanted the authorial intent for this to be, what their intentions were while building this, why the guitar does what it does while the bleakness is present in pretty much everything else. Why do the drums have this forward momentum to it if everything about this song is about a bleak staticness, being stuck in a place? These are my thoughts though. Broder Daniel, Shoreline. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Please put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.